I intended to surprise my wife on our anniversary, but instead I discovered she was cheating on me. I recently had a conversation with my wife of 11 years, and sadly, it ended with her in tears. This reminded me of a similar situation 3 years ago when I almost lost my job. Back then, my wife Kate, also known as Catherine, was so upset at the thought of me missing our anniversary that she insisted I return home quickly. Fast forward to today, and now she won't be there for our anniversary. Despite everything, I didn't try to change her mind. The past 12 years, however, have been the happiest of my life. When I first met Kate, she was 24 and just beginning her sales career. She visited our architectural firm to persuade us to advertise in expensive magazines, which we couldn't afford at the time. In the crowd, I couldn't help but notice this captivating woman with black hair. After talking it over with my partner, he helped me get her attention long enough to ask her out. After our first meeting, she admitted she knew we couldn't afford her services, yet I fell deeply in love with her. Our relationship grew over 6 months, and eventually, she moved in with me for another 6 months as she transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to a stable office job. 4 months later, we married. Every day, I still feel incredibly lucky that I convinced her to marry me. With urgency, I dialed my boss's number again. I've been with the company from the start. And when Craig began the company, our small team of just 4 designers achieved incredible success by cutting down production times across different areas. Craig, I know you're there. Please pick up, I urged into the phone. Finally, I heard his voice on the other end. Dan, I'm really busy right now, he replied briefly. I decided to keep it short and said, well, I'm leaving now and won't be back until Monday. He asked, leaving? Where are you going? I answered, I'm going to celebrate my anniversary with my wife. I'll be back Monday. Have a good trip, he said. Don't forget to knock before entering. I laughed and replied, you always make me laugh. He responded, I hear that a lot, just not from those who really know you. Apologetically, I added, I'm sorry, but ever since they brought in this guy to manage Kate's department, things have been tense at home. Maybe a hotel getaway will help ease things. Well, it certainly can't hurt, he said. Just do me a favor and remember me when you're seeking adventure. Craig grinned. Deal. See you Monday, I said. I didn't hang up right away and asked Craig's secretary, Rosa, for a favor. She knew how to get things done, and I needed a plane ticket. After talking with her, I packed up and headed home. While packing my suitcase, the phone rang. You have 45 minutes to get to the airport for your security check. The ticket is waiting for you at the counter, Rose informed me. She'd booked a return flight for me on Sunday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Unfortunately, there were no rooms available at Kate's hotel, so she secured one for me 2 blocks away. Have a safe trip. See you Monday, Rose said. Hearing that, I rushed to the bathroom to grab my shaving kit, packed quickly, and did a last check of the room, even turning off the coffee maker, which was unusual for me. Then I hurried to the car. Over the past 15 years, I've discovered shortcuts that help me reach my destination faster. Despite my speed, I made it to the flight with time to spare. After registration, security, and boarding, we finally took off. Once seated, I put on my headphones and played music to calm my nerves. I'm a nervous flyer, and music helps me relax. About 3 hours into the flight, I was suddenly awakened from a pleasant dream about Kate and me by a gentle tap on my shoulder. I had fallen asleep, which wasn't surprising given my lack of sleep recently, partly due to work stress. Kate and I had been going through a rough patch for the past few months. For over 2 months, she had been keeping her distance, not letting me get close. It all began when she told me a colleague from another department had received a promotion, taking over her own role. She was determined to prove that decision wrong and worked hard to show her worth. For the first 2 weeks, she came home exhausted, constantly talking about strategies to outshine Mr. Paul Reynolds. But over time, her determination faded, and after a couple of weeks, she mentioned they started cooperating. I grew more anxious as their joint project to win a big client approached. Thoughts of a potential romance between them crossed my mind, but Kate kept reassuring me. Taking my bag from the overhead compartment, I wondered how to invite Kate to dinner without giving away the surprise. After catching a taxi to my hotel, I had a casual chat with the driver who mentioned a charming, dimly lit restaurant between our two hotels. It sounded like just what I had in mind. After checking in, I quickly showered and rushed out, eager to catch Kate before she left for dinner. Glancing at the clock in the lobby, I saw it was almost 5:30. Watching the busy street outside, I decided to walk to my destination, following the directions from the receptionist. The route was simple, and I remembered the charming restaurant the taxi driver had mentioned, which was just a few steps from her hotel. When I left the taxi, I tipped the driver generously. By 5:50, I entered the hotel lobby and stood in line at the reception desk. A woman smiled at me and motioned for me to approach. "Hello," I greeted her warmly. "My name is Dan Cardiff. Is my wife Catherine Cardiff in her room? I'd like to speak with her." "Catherine Cardiff," she said, double checking. After a moment, she replied, "Yes, she's a guest here. Let me check if she's in." She dialed the room number, then turned back to me with an apologetic tone. "I'm sorry, sir, but there was no answer. Would you like to leave a message?" "Not right now," I replied, a hint of disappointment in my voice. "I was hoping to surprise her. We're celebrating our anniversary tomorrow. I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention our conversation." "No problem, sir," she reassured me. "I wish you a wonderful day tomorrow." "Thank you. I'm thinking about heading to a restaurant. Maybe I'll get lucky," I said. "Good night," I added as I waved her off. Walking to the far end of the lobby, I spotted a noisy hall filled with people engaged in various activities, working, serving, sitting, and eating. It was packed, and I knew the chances of finding Kate in such a crowded place were slim. Then I noticed a restroom in the back. I searched desperately, scanning left and right for any sign of her. Despite my efforts, she was nowhere to be found. After finishing, I stood by the corridor entrance and scanned the room again. It seemed hopeless. Finding her here was nearly impossible. But then, I heard a faint laugh that sounded like hers. Following the wall with my eyes, I saw towering booths blocking my view, giving me only glimpses of people's faces. Reluctant to approach any table for fear of being noticed, I retraced my steps, turning my gaze toward the wall and slowly walking along the row of tables. At the third booth from the corridor, I saw her, sitting with a man I didn't recognize. She looked radiant, wearing the same elegant dress she always wore on nights when we'd go dancing. Their conversation appeared relaxed, as though they were completely at ease with each other. I couldn't help but wonder what was really happening between them. It seemed far more intimate than just a dinner with a colleague. My heart raced as the man leaned closer to her, and I instinctively grabbed the doorframe for support as she bent. Their lips met in a soft kiss, filled with conflicting emotions. I decided to leave the doorway and move to the center of the hall, settling into one of the high-backed chairs. Time seemed to lose meaning as I sat there, unable to look away from their table. Suddenly, I heard her laughter again, which pulled my attention toward her. Turning my head, I saw her walking alongside him, holding his hand tightly with both of hers. Their closeness, combined with the general mood, sparked my curiosity. They passed by just 15 feet away. And although they were engaged in conversation, my focus remained solely on the loving expression she wore as she gazed at him. It had been a long time since I had seen such an adoring look. At that moment, I felt a lump in my throat, and for a second, I was lost for words. I headed for the exit, my face likely showing my displeasure, driven by a sudden surge of determination. I walked straight to the sidewalk, unable to take my eyes off them. She clung to his arm, leaning affectionately against him. I watched them walk down the street, eventually turning a corner and disappearing into a restaurant I had noticed earlier. Snapping out of my trance, I quickly moved toward the door, suddenly aware of my surroundings. I decided to slow my pace, giving them some time to get further away from the entrance. I paused, taking a few deep breaths in an attempt to calm myself. There was undoubtedly meaning in their expressions, but I wanted more, even though I couldn't fully grasp what that was. Summoning my resolve, I pushed open the door and entered cautiously, staying close to the wall since the entrance was unguarded. I waited patiently for my eyes to adjust, scanning the room until I finally spotted them sitting at a table for two at the far end. I made my way over, keeping my hands against the wall for support as I sat down at a small table. The waitress appeared almost immediately behind me. "What can I get for you, dear?" she asked. A double scotch on the rocks, I replied. I overheard their conversation as they sat together. Our meeting tomorrow isn't until 10, so we can celebrate well into the night, he said to Kate in a quiet tone. I'm glad you didn't let him pressure you into going home. We wouldn't miss our 2-month anniversary for anything, she exclaimed. I can't believe it's been 2 months already. He responded, It could have been longer, if only you'd accepted my offer at the end of my first week. He reminisced. She laughed and replied, I had to play the innocent girl with you, considering I'm supposedly married. She shook her head in disbelief, recalling the moment when he asked her out in front of Marge, fully aware of his marital status. Marge actually told me you liked me, he said. We should do something nice for her, since she helped bring us together, Kate suggested, as the waitress brought their drinks and quickly walked away. Raising their glasses in a toast, they celebrated the 2 months they had spent together and the many more to come. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, as their glasses clinked together. There will be many more, she replied cheerfully. The waitress set my glass in front of me and asked, Is that all? I handed her a $10 bill, saying, Thank you, ma'am, before turning my attention back to the table next to me. They glanced up, but my presence seemed insignificant to them. Kate, noticing his gaze, turned and looked at me. You know, a guy should always carry a camera for moments like these, I remarked. Her expression was so boundless, it could easily be used for a poster. She sat there, her lips moving soundlessly, a perfect picture. Wow, 2 months? What a special anniversary, I continued. I still remember mine, but after 11 years, it starts to lose its charm. Watching them both, I muttered, Let's celebrate 2 months. It's a symbol of passion and success, isn't it? A lovely couple like you certainly deserves a gift. So, here's my offer. I tossed the ring in Kate's direction. Before I could finish, Paul interrupted with a loud outburst. Realizing I had stayed too long, I turned to Kate, who was trying to calm him down, and said, Tell him how lucky he is that he wasn't in my house. I then added, Please contact me and let me know where you'd like your things sent. If you're smart, you'll avoid coming to my home. Applying ice to your nose should help with the discomfort. I turned and left, exiting the club. I walked quickly back to the hotel, knowing it was unlikely Kate knew my current address. Given how I had acted toward her friend, it seemed doubtful she would pursue me. Eager to put distance between us, I rushed into the lobby and approached the front desk. Excuse me, do you have contact numbers for airlines? I need to book a flight urgently, I asked. Certainly, sir, the employee replied. May I ask your preferred airline, departure time, and destination? After providing all the necessary information, she assured me she would bring the flight details to my room. Back in the room, I began pacing, confused by the turn of events. How could this have happened? Then a thought struck me. Maybe Kate had missed her true calling in life. Her behavior over the past few months had been unexpected. As frustration mounted, I realized I couldn't stay in the room any longer. Grabbing my bag, I hurried downstairs to the lobby. The receptionist, who had just finished a phone call, signaled for me to approach. Sir, if you leave now, you might catch the last flight today. Registration closes in 30 minutes. If you miss it, the next flight is in 3 hours, she told me. I thanked her and hoped the local taxi drivers were reliable. I signed the cash receipt handed to me by the woman at the desk. I'm sorry I have to cut my visit short, she said with a warm smile. Please stay with us next time. I nodded and headed for the exit. A rush of unforgettable memories hit me as I quickly left the lobby and grabbed a taxi from the nearby parking lot. I'll bet you $50 that you can get me to the airport in under 30 minutes, I said as I got into the car. The driver responded, You got it, boss. He turned out to be experienced and got me to my destination in just 20 minutes. I paid the fare and left a generous $150 tip, expressing my thanks before hurrying to the airport entrance. Reflecting later, I realized I had plenty of time to spare. After passing security, I eagerly awaited the boarding announcement. Unlike last time, when I needed music to distract me, there were plenty of things to keep my mind occupied. A funny thought crossed my mind, and I had to stifle a laugh. I remembered how Kate's mother had never liked me. While Deborah had complete control over her husband, she treated Greg terribly, almost as if he didn't matter. I couldn't tolerate her behavior, and she knew it. One day, she even accused me of cheating on Kate, claiming she saw me looking at other women when we were together. Throughout the entire flight, doubts about what was unfolding continued to bother me. I pulled out the photo I've always carried of Kate and me, studying it closely. Suddenly, the person next to Kate in the photo seemed unfamiliar. I glanced around to ensure no one had noticed, then returned my gaze to the picture. In the photo, I stood beside her. What caught my attention was the way Kate looked into his eyes. It made me question everything. Although men aren't usually known for having good memories, I considered myself an exception. Like most women, Kate would often test my memory by asking me, "Do you remember this?" Or "Do you remember that?" Unfortunately for her, I remembered everything. I recalled every conversation, every plan, and all the secrets we whispered in the dark. Sitting there now, I couldn't help but wonder if I had missed this for the past 2 months, what else had I overlooked? The man had shown interest in her from the very first week they met, yet she insisted she rejected his advances to maintain her marriage. The thought of them being together made me uneasy. I came up with a two-part plan. First, I would go home, pack all her things, and take them to her mother's house. Of course, her mother would find a way to blame me, but the truth was, I saw our family life unraveling. I went straight to my car and joined the exit queue. The drive home felt like a blur, and I couldn't recall much of it. It didn't matter, though, because I reached my destination. The journey's length was a mystery, but it was of no importance. Stepping into the dimly lit house, an odd sense of unfamiliarity struck me. The idea that I would have to get used to this as the new normal consumed me. After dropping my bag, I made my way to the kitchen. On the way, I automatically turned on the answering machine. A pleading voice came through the speaker. "Dan, please don't do anything hasty. I'm coming home to talk. Please wait until I get there." Her tone sounded pained, trying to convey her emotions. I knew the cheater deserved consequences, but I couldn't bear to listen to her, especially in that voice. I reacted impulsively, slamming my fist down. My actions may have been rash, but I needed to protect myself from making foolish choices. It was clear that I wouldn't be able to sleep that night, so I went to the garage and gathered the suitcases she had accumulated over the years. I chose a large black suitcase and a bag for her clothes, setting them aside, then took the rest to the bedroom. As I sifted through her closet, I carefully picked a few items and stuffed them into one of the large bags. I repeated this several times before turning my attention to the dresser. It had been so long since I had seen her underwear tucked in there. For a brief moment, the thought of grabbing some hot dogs crossed my mind, but I pushed it aside. I was supposed to go to her mother's house, but I didn't want to, so I decided to deal with things alone rather than involve her parents or anyone else. I impulsively went to the hardware store to buy new locks. When I returned home, I realized I couldn't leave the pile of her belongings in the front room. Following through with my thoughts, I loaded everything into the car and headed for her mom's house. I drove carefully and unloaded the items near the garage, not wanting to make things harder for Greg, especially since his wife and daughter wouldn't be helping him. As I dropped the third box, my mother-in-law appeared. "Hi, Dan! What's all this? What's going on?" she asked. I explained, "Well, when Kate arrives, she might need her clothes." I thought she'd bring them herself, but I couldn't wait any longer. They were cluttering the front room. Confused, her face went pale. "What do you mean when Kate arrives? I thought she wasn't in town yet. Why would her things be here?" "Deborah, I'm not sure what she plans to do, but I assumed she might stay with you for a while. She could be thinking about moving in with the person she's been spending time with, but I can't say for sure. That's why I brought her stuff," I explained. I expected her face to grow even paler, and she responded, "What are you implying? How can you accuse my daughter of such things? She had to stay there for work. She would never cheat on you." Her voice trembled, nearing hysteria. "I even saw them together last time. They looked happy. They were celebrating their 2-month anniversary at a lively nightclub near their hotel. I repeated that I had asked Kate to join me for our anniversary, but she regrettably declined. Determined, I hopped on a plane to be with her. However, when I arrived, I found them having a quiet dinner, their atmosphere intimate. I didn't want to intrude on their special moment. After witnessing their tender kiss across the table, I needed time to collect my thoughts. When they passed me in the hotel lobby, I thought about saying something, but as Kate gazed at him and whispered in his ear, I couldn't bring myself to interrupt them. I just needed some fresh air, so I stepped outside. To my surprise, they left and went to the nearest nightclub. I sat at a nearby table and overheard her saying she didn't want to leave him on their 2-month anniversary. He corrected her, saying it was their 3rd month together. It struck me that if I wanted to leave, I would need to intervene. I tried to stay inconspicuous, but I knew I had to find proof. After 10 years of sobriety, I took my first sip of alcohol. It had been 10 years since Kate had expressed concern about my drinking, believing it could jeopardize our marriage. In response, I gave her my wedding ring, thinking it was a sensible gesture to give each of us something of our own, but honestly, I preferred his gift over mine. Now, as I waited for her return and the inevitable confrontation, I was sure she would seek refuge at my doorstep for a while. I stated, hoping to shock her, "You're lying. How can you say such things about your wife of 11 years? She's told me everything. She's deeply troubled by it. I'll never refer to this woman as my wife again. You might feel obligated to support her because she's your daughter, but I have no such obligations." I continued, I witnessed everything firsthand. For the past 2 months, I've been living alone, while she's been with him since he joined this company. It's astonishing to see how she's changed, given the upbringing you provided. She looked me in the eye for 3 months, lying to me every single day without a hint of remorse. If you think I'll let her back into my home, then you're more foolish than she is. But it's your choice what to believe. Personally, I've decided to cut my losses. It's clear she has strong feelings for this man, and he's free to have her. She won't hide their relationship anymore. Once she's done with her charades, I'll send her here. You can see for yourself who's been dishonest. As I spoke, I instructed her, if she picks up, be sure to deliver the message exactly as I've said, including the fact that I'm eager to see how she handles this. With those words, I got in the car and drove away, feeling uneasy. I wandered around the house for hours before finding a small corner in the garage, where I set up an improvised workspace. Suddenly, I was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Curiosity got the best of me, and I went to answer it. I opened the door carefully, stepping back without saying a word. Kate walked in and immediately noted, "You must have been in the garage." She closed the door behind her. "I tried knocking, but you didn't hear me." "I was just tidying up," I replied, observing the room. Kate sighed and said, "Well, Mom already called me. Looks like you've already made up your mind about what to do with me." She looked at me with a mix of sadness and disappointment. "What did you expect? That I wouldn't mind you having an affair?" I asked her. She paused before responding, "I guess I wasn't thinking clearly, at least not rationally." I was overwhelmed by disappointment. "It's a shame because all I did was think." I confessed, she continued. "You see, there was no one around to distract me from my thoughts. I missed having someone to go out with, to visit a club, to whisper and kiss in the dark. But I was left with a woman who could deceive me without hesitation, even looking me straight in the eye. She could share my home, my food, my life, and then be with someone else. Not a pleasant image, is it? Are you really ready to let go of 11 years of our life together?" "What is it?" she asked. "Did you even ask me about it, Dan? Would it have bothered you if I had a real relationship with someone else, instead of just playing games? I thought that question would stay with me, but it doesn't seem to matter anymore, does it? Now you and the person whose name I can't even remember can move on, free from caring about me. No more struggles over deciding whom to spend our anniversary with." "I think I understand your perspective," Kate said. "Do you really understand, Kate?" I replied. "Because I truly doubt that you do. You see, for you, it was just infidelity. You probably found a way to justify it, maybe even shifted the blame onto me. Could it have been that my actions drove you to be involved with him? Does it? Now, you and the person whose name I can't even recall can move on without any care for me. No more struggles over deciding who to spend our anniversary with," I said, heading toward a chair. "I think I understand your perspective," Kate responded. "Do you really understand, Kate?" I replied. "Because I honestly doubt you do. For you, this was just an act of infidelity. You probably found a way to justify it, maybe even shifted the blame onto me. Could it have been, Kate, that my actions pushed you to get involved with someone else? She lowered her gaze and answered, "No, I don't blame you for this. It just happened. Having an affair with someone other than your spouse for 2 months isn't an accident," I said. "It takes effort, and keeping the affair going requires even more effort and secrecy. Let me tell you, honey, you've been playing your role well. I fell in love with you completely and unconditionally. It's unbelievable how both of you found time for your game. I can't even imagine what it's like to laugh about cheating on me and then making that tearful phone call last night. That was a performance. Maybe you should consider a career change. Your performance could easily outshine the last 3 Oscar winners." I paused and couldn't help but laugh for a brief moment. A quick, unintended burst of laughter before I stopped myself. "I don't know where that came from," I said. "But it's clear you don't love me if that's how you treat someone you claim to love. Please spare me your anger." "How can you say that I don't love you after 11 years?" she protested indignantly. "Listen, Kate," I said, "since you seem to enjoy asking questions, here's one for you. Given your deep introspection, you know how you usually react in certain situations. Now, imagine that I found out you had a close relationship with another man, but it was a one-time thing, not a long-term affair. How do you think I'd react?" She leaned toward me, speaking softly. "Honestly, I think I would have asked you to leave our house and start divorce proceedings." I thanked her for her honesty, admitting that I had expected such a response. "I even imagined you might throw something at me, but who knows?" I mused aloud. She responded with a faint smile. "Perhaps. And now, imagine that for nearly 3 months, everything we shared meant nothing to me. It was all just an act, a facade to deceive you into thinking our relationship was thriving, while I was going through the motions and my heart belonged to someone else. Can you honestly believe I love you after nearly 13 years? Show me some confidence, Kate," I said seriously. "It's as if you're suggesting you don't care about this. The time we spent together meant a lot to me. It wasn't just casual conversation. I genuinely enjoyed being with you. Do you remember the last time we were close, Kate? When was the last time you initiated one of our affectionate kisses? When did you last act like my wife?" I asked. "After what I've seen and heard, I find it hard to believe you're standing here telling me you love me. I'm not naive. I overheard you talking about him with that gossip Marge as soon as he arrived at the office. Then you both came up with the idea of giving her a gift for bringing you two together. Seems like you've already found your next bridesmaid. All that's left is to find his best man, and the wedding banquet will be set," I commented, reclining in my chair. "So it turns out you're just like me after all," I added. "Should I expect a server to show up at my door?" Kate asked. "What is it?" I replied. "First, I need to know where you're going to live," she said. "You won't find a process server waiting for you to deliver divorce papers. I've reserved that privilege for myself." "That's it," I said. "The case is closed. Escape from Kate and move on. If you happen to see me with someone else, please don't try to intervene." "What are you trying to prove with all this?" Kate asked. "I probably didn't think I needed to prove anything to you. What I did for myself, not for you. Why would I fight for a man like you? You who respected me so little, who thought I would tolerate or make excuses for the way you treated me. When I gave you the ring, it was a clear sign that you were done. I don't want to invest my energy into something that no longer matters to either of us. I can't forget or forgive. And based on your past and present actions, it's clear that I'm not a priority for you. So it's time for me to leave you, Kate, and move on. I don't pretend to understand how you thought things would end, but you certainly ruined everything. Now it's your turn to sleep at his place," I said, locking eyes with her. "You're kicking me out and keeping everything for yourself." "To be honest, it seems unfair after 11 years, she replied. "It always comes down to a deal, doesn't it?" "Well, that's settled," I said. "If you need a house, you'll have to pay for it. As for me, I want to keep the house. I've fallen in love with it. With the extra space, I can finally transform it into what I truly want." "I assumed you and Paul had already found a place," I remarked. "His name is Paul," she corrected. "I couldn't care less about that." "Do you really think he has nowhere to live?" I asked. "Well, of course he does," she answered. "In that case, problem solved," I remarked. I was waiting for your answer, I continued. So I guess you don't think his wife will agree to this arrangement? I noticed her expression change. Wait, did you find out everything about him? How did you know he was married? She asked, looking at me seriously. This isn't a joke. You really think I'm naive, don't you? Why else would you be here, Kate? So, what's the deal? He doesn't want to divorce his wife for you? I've thought about it, I said. I considered that our relationship had lasted 11 years. But upon reflection, I've concluded that we're done. This decision was made by you. Let's reminisce about those 2 incredible months you spent together and hope for even more in the future. But keep in mind, when I gave you the ring, it was the end. Please don't try to make excuses about our 11 years. Those years didn't matter to you back then, and they don't matter to me now. So, I'll compensate for those 11 years with legal papers as soon as they're ready. The house offer remains unchanged. If you don't want to leave, you can come back and take whatever you want. It seems you're ready to move on without hesitation. Divorce me and go on your way. You may be trying to elicit my sympathy, but I want to make it clear. I'm moving on from someone I can't trust living under the same roof with me. I will never trust you again. So what's your plan? Do you want to keep the house for yourself? I asked. No, I have no desire to keep the house. Give me a few days to find a new place, and I'll probably take a significant portion of the furniture, she replied, pulling her hand out of her pocket. What should I do with this? She asked, handing me the ring. Do whatever you want with it, I answered. Oh, I have an idea. Why not use it as a toe ring? It would fit perfectly on your big toe, given how you treated him. I might actually find some use for it. Okay, you know what? I could use some extra money. Maybe I'll pawn it, she said. Well, you won't get much for it. They buy these things by weight, and you probably won't even get 130. You can't buy a real gold ring for 130, but that's just my opinion. It's your ring, so do what you want with it, I said, turning toward the door. Did you get all my stuff out of the closet? She asked. Yes, I got everything, though I wasn't too careful with the furniture. I'll call you in a few days. I have to admit, I didn't pack your things very neatly. I hope you still have clean, unwrinkled clothes after the trip, I commented. May I take a look? She inquired. Of course, don't be shy. You know where everything is, I said, noticing a slight frown on her face. I waited patiently as she inspected the room. I could hear her rummaging in the bedroom, then in the closet, and finally in the bathroom. A few minutes later, she hurried downstairs, packing cosmetics into a floral zip-up bag. You were thorough. You only missed a few things. I may need to call you when it's time to move, she said with a forced smile. Of course, I'd be happy to help, as long as it's not too close to me, I replied, smiling as I got up to open the door for her. When she suggested going for a walk, I paused for a moment, considering her request, and then an idea struck me. Wouldn't it be too much to ask you to run around instead? I asked, maintaining a serious expression. Kiss me on the spot, she replied, turning to leave. I wouldn't dare kiss someone who knows where she's been, I retorted, closing the door behind her. That marked the end of our communication. 3 months later, my lawyer diligently filed all the necessary divorce documents, instructing me to pick them up from his office on Monday. My itinerary for the day included 2 stops. The lawyer's office. After parking my car at my mother-in-law's house, I paused for a moment, looking at the familiar exterior and reflecting on the completion of this final task. It might take a while, but eventually I would find peace and enjoy quiet nights again, as this chapter would finally be closed. Stepping out of the car, I approached the front door and rang the doorbell. To my surprise, my mother-in-law answered. Well, Dan, what brings you here? What's going on? She asked. I thought you had forgotten about us already. I replied, Not yet. Is Kate here? Yes, she's here. Come on in, she said, closing the door behind her. A few moments later, Kate entered the room. Kate, I'm here for you to sign these papers. I'll file them tomorrow and then our divorce will be finalized. I just want it to be over, I explained. Kate sighed and said, I don't think I've ever been good enough for you, have I? Do you really think I'll just stand by and watch your actions over the past few months? Kate briefly left the room, but returned soon after with a pen in her hand. She hurriedly signed her name on the appropriate pages. I observed her actions closely. And when she finished, she forcefully placed the pen on the table and quickly gathered everything into a manila envelope, preparing it for archiving. Free now, she said. Thank you for signing these. Take care of yourself and find happiness. Shifting her attention from me to herself, she added, Mom, you can come into the room now. Congratulations to you as well, I replied before walking out the door. As I drove away, I was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions. I knew this marked the end of our relationship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that life was about to take a new direction. Just a month later, our divorce was finalized, marking the beginning of an entirely different life. Eventually, I received unexpected news from Kate's father. He told me that after our divorce, Kate had asked Paul to leave his wife and marry her. However, Paul made it clear to Kate that he couldn't do that. He admitted that their relationship lacked any romantic feelings from his side. It seemed that after hearing this, Kate had to come to terms with the fact that she would have to live without me and without Paul. Learning from the mistakes of our past, Kate now lives with her parents and is looking for a new job after being shamefully fired from her previous one, just like Paul, thanks to me. According to her father, Kate is unhappy. She's had several encounters, but they've involved either married men seeking only casual affairs or men with questionable reputations engaging in indiscriminate relationships. This led to Kate developing a mental illness, and she's now undergoing therapy.